Like, subscribe, and comment if you're ready to step into a place where time dies slowly and truth is buried behind steel. The sirens cut through the Colorado night like a warning no one could ignore. Red and blue lights bounced off the razor wires surrounding ADX Florence, the most secure prison in America. At 2:17 a.m., every road leading to the facility was sealed. State troopers blocked the highway. Federal agents rushed through security checkpoints that almost never saw this level of panic. Something had gone wrong inside a prison designed so nothing ever does. In a narrow administrative corridor, a body lay face down on the concrete floor. The man was still wearing his Bureau of Prisons badge. Deputy Warden Thomas Keller had been alive less than an hour earlier. Now his neck was twisted at an unnatural angle, his radio smashed beside him, its last transmission cut off mid-sentence. ADX Florence wasn't supposed to produce crime scenes. It was supposed to erase them. It's where they send the worst of the worst. Men so dangerous they're locked away from the world and each other. This wasn't just a murder, it was an impossibility. Special Agent Mara Ellison arrived before dawn, her breath visible in the cold as she stared up at the concrete fortress. She had worked organized crime, domestic terror cases, and federal conspiracies, but this place unsettled her in a way she couldn't explain. ADX wasn't loud or chaotic like other prisons. It was silent, controlled, every movement tracked, every door locked. It was a machine designed for absolute containment. For someone to die here, especially a senior official, meant the system itself had been breached. The machine was broken. Inside, the prison felt frozen in time. Fluorescent lights hummed over empty, sterile hallways. Doors remained sealed. Inmates stayed locked in single-man cells, unaware, or pretending to be, of the chaos unfolding just beyond their steel walls. Keller's body had been found between two secured zones, an area accessible only by biometric clearance and rotating codes known to fewer than 10 people. This wasn't a crime of opportunity. It was a ghost moving through the walls. Ellison reviewed the initial facts with the on-site investigators. No signs of forced entry, no missing keys, no cameras malfunctioning, except one. A single hallway camera had gone dark for exactly 90 seconds during the estimated time of death. 90 seconds. Inside ADX Florence, that was an eternity. Enough time to commit an impossible crime and vanish without a trace. The first assumption was an inmate plot, some elaborate scheme hatched by a criminal mastermind. But that theory collapsed almost immediately. No prisoner had been released from their cell. No restraints had been removed. No alarms triggered. The cells themselves were airtight worlds, concrete boxes designed to prevent communication, coordination, or opportunity. Whatever happened to Keller didn't come from behind a cell door. It came from within the system. Ellison began digging into Keller's recent activity, searching for a motive in the digital breadcrumbs he left behind. His emails revealed late-night logins, classified file access, and a pattern that didn't match his usual routine. He was looking for something that made him a target. He had requested archived records tied to inmates who had been transferred, silenced, or buried under layers of sealed paperwork. Men whose names never appeared in headlines anymore, but whose crimes once shook the country. These were the ghosts of ADX, the ones the system wanted everyone to forget. One file stood out, a digital folder flagged with multiple security warnings. Inmate number 78144-014. A man who had been officially declared non-communicative. No visitors, no interviews, no movement outside his cell in over 7 years. According to records, he was alive, but barely acknowledged as such. He was a phantom on the books, a name without a face. Yet Keller had accessed that file 3 times in the last week. The obsession was clear. Keller believed this phantom held a key. As Ellison walked the cold corridor where Keller died, her eyes scanned every inch of the scene. And then she saw it. Something almost invisible, something everyone else had missed. A faint smear on the wall, not blood, but graphite. Someone had written a number, then tried to wipe it away. Only the final digit remained. A single, clear number. 3. What did it mean? A cell number? A password? A countdown? It was a message from the grave, a final, desperate clue. She immediately ordered a lockdown audit. Every staff member, every access code, every movement within the last 24 hours. That's when another detail surfaced, something that made the entire room go silent. At the exact moment the camera feed went dark, at the exact time Keller was murdered, his clearance badge had been used twice. Once by Keller himself, to enter the corridor, and once by someone else. Someone who, according to the ADX Florence records, wasn't supposed to exist anymore. The system registered a ghost, a dead man walking the halls. The pieces started clicking into place. The phantom inmate, the ghost in the system, the secret Keller was chasing. It all led back to one place. Ellison put in a formal request, using her highest federal clearance, to open inmate 78144-014's sealed housing unit. She needed to see who, or what, was inside that cell. The response came back instantly. Access denied. But the denial didn't come from the prison warden. It didn't come from the Bureau of Prisons. The order came from Washington, the very top. The truth wasn't just buried in ADX Florence. It was being protected by the most powerful people in the country. And Agent L. Washington's denial wasn't a delay. It was a door slamming shut. A flat, authoritative refusal that didn't bother to explain itself. For FBI agent Mara Ellison, that was all the confirmation she needed. Someone was protecting whatever, or whoever, was behind inmate number 78144-014. She wasn't about to stop. By mid-morning, ADX Florence, America's most secure prison, was operating under a quiet, simmering panic. The inmates were sealed in their concrete boxes, but the staff wasn't. Guards whispered in corners. Administrators avoided eye contact. Deputy Warden Keller's apparent suicide had cracked the illusion of absolute control, and everyone felt the tremors. Ellison convened a closed-door briefing with the current warden and two internal affairs officers who had been flown in overnight. She laid out the facts methodically, her voice steady and precise. Keller's unauthorized access to a dead-end file. The duplicated badge use that got him into a restricted area. The erased camera window that covered his movements. And finally, the stone wall from Washington. When she finished, the room was heavy with silence. Finally, the warden, a man who had seen everything, broke the quiet. That inmate, he said, choosing his words with extreme care, doesn't exist in any operational sense. He's legacy. Legacy. It was a word used to bury mistakes, to sweep inconvenient truths under the concrete foundations of the prison itself. Ellison pushed harder. She learned that inmate 78144-014 had arrived at ADX Florence under a blanket of extraordinary secrecy. No press release. No public court transcripts. Even his conviction records were sealed tight under national security exemptions. Officially, the story was that he'd orchestrated a sprawling criminal network involved in contract killings, money laundering, and high-level federal corruption. But unofficially, dark rumors clung to his name. Whispers that he knew where the bodies were buried, not metaphorically, but literally. Claims that he had traded secrets to stay alive, secrets powerful people wanted to remain hidden forever. And then, 7 years ago, he simply vanished from all internal communications. No medical logs, no disciplinary reports, no movement requests, just a single, cryptic line repeating every quarter. Inmate status unchanged. It was as if he'd become a ghost in the machine. Ellison demanded the raw system logs, the deep-down data that most people never bothered to look at, the digital bedrock of the facility. And that's where she found the first crack in the facade. Over the past year, inmate 78144-014 cell had registered micropower fluctuations. They were barely noticeable, almost statistical noise, but they were consistent. The kind of tiny power spikes that only happened when internal lighting systems were manually overridden. Someone had been turning the lights on in that cell. And lights don't turn themselves on. As Ellison dug deeper, the pressure from above started to mount. A senior DOJ official called her directly, his voice calm, polished, and rehearsed. He advised her to narrow the scope of her investigation. He suggested she focus on Keller's personal issues. Stress, fatigue, maybe some misconduct. Anything but the inmate in that forgotten cell. Ellison recognized the tactic instantly. Redirect. Isolate. Discredit. It was the standard playbook for a cover-up. She ignored it. Instead, she tracked down Keller's assistant, a young analyst named Ben Carter. He was a wreck. Exhausted, his eyes bloodshot, his hands trembling as he clutched a cup of coffee. Ben admitted that Keller had been acting paranoid in the weeks leading up to his death. He decomplained about ghost entries in the system, access logs that didn't match any active personnel on duty. He was convinced someone inside ADX was manipulating records from a closed, untraceable terminal. Then Ben leaned in close, his voice dropping to a terrified whisper that made the hair on Ellison's arms stand up. "Keller told me," he stammered, "that the man in that cell, he wasn't just talking to someone. He was giving orders." Before Ellison could press him for more, a series of alarms echoed faintly through the building. Not a full-blown emergency, but a low-level alert, just enough to set everyone's nerves on edge. Moments later, a guard burst into the interview room, his face pale. Another staff member had collapsed in the central surveillance wing. He was dead. No visible injuries. No signs of a struggle. Just a man slumped over his console, his eyes wide open. A single word typed over and over on his screen. Time. 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 2 deaths. Both connected to systems access. Both inside a fortress designed to eliminate every single variable of unpredictability. Ellison rushed to the surveillance wing. The dead guard's console was still active, displaying a live feed, a camera view that shouldn't have been accessible to anyone. It showed the inside of a cell. The camera angle was slightly tilted, off-kilter, as if it had been adjusted by hand from inside. And the cell was empty. No inmate. No body. Just a bare concrete room. But the walls were covered in deep, deliberate scratch marks. And carved into the floor, clear as day, was a sentence etched into the concrete itself. "You don't leave ADX Florence." As Ellison stared, mesmerized and horrified, at the screen, her phone vibrated. An encrypted message from an unknown sender. It contained a single attachment. An image. It was Deputy Warden Keller. Alive. Standing in that very same cell, staring directly into the camera. And in the corner of the image, a timestamp. It was dated 36 hours after his official time of death. The impossible was happening. A single image is all it took to shatter reality. Mara Ellison stared at the photo, at its impossible timestamp. The man in the picture, Keller, wasn't just dead. He had been erased from the timeline, then rewritten. Her pulse hammered against her ribs, every single one of her assumptions collapsing like a house of cards. If this photo was real, and everything about it screamed that it was, then Keller had walked into that prison cell after he was officially reported dead. This meant one of two things. Either the entire system, a fortress of digital security, was lying, or someone, somewhere, had figured out how to bend time itself. Without hesitation, Ellison ordered an immediate, total isolation of the internal network at ADX Florence, the most secure supermax prison on the planet. The lights in her command center flickered ominously as the systems rebooted. For the first time in decades, the unbreakable prison felt fragile, unstable. Across the facility, guards started reporting strange glitches. Door locks had delayed responses. Communication systems lagged, creating an unnerving silence between panicked calls. The fortress was still standing, but its central nervous system was failing. That's when the call from Washington finally came through. This time, the voice on the other end of the line wasn't the usual calm, bureaucratic drone. It was afraid, genuinely afraid. In broken, hesitant fragments, Ellison was told the truth. The prisoner at the center of this chaos, inmate 78144-014, wasn't just some common criminal. He had once been a high-level intelligence asset. He was an architect, a builder of criminal networks so vast and deeply embedded within organized crime. Private security firms, and even corrupt government institutions that taking him down outright would have been catastrophic. It would have exposed dozens of protected operations, burned countless assets, and sent shockwaves through the global intelligence community. So, they came up with another plan. Instead of eliminating him, they buried him alive inside ADX Florence. His existence was classified top secret. His voice was supposed to be silenced forever. But silence, it turned out, was never the real plan. Over the years, intelligence officials had quietly consulted him. They'd send him hypothetical questions, strategic, what-if scenarios, picking his brilliant mind without ever acknowledging his existence. He never left his cell. He never touched a phone, never saw another person face to face. Everything was controlled, filtered through layers of security and anonymity. Or so they all believed. What none of these brilliant minds accounted for was the simple, terrifying power of patience. After what felt like an eternity of stonewalling, Ellison finally got the clearance she needed. It was unofficial, whispered over a secure line, and completely unrecorded. She was authorized to open the sealed housing unit where the inmate was kept. A single, heavily armed tactical team accompanied her down a long, dust-filled corridor that no one had walked in years. The air was stale, heavy, as if the prison itself was holding its breath in anticipation. The cell door, a monolithic slab of reinforced steel, slid open with a hydraulic hiss. The cell was empty. No inmate. No body. No sign of a struggle or a forced escape. It was just an empty concrete box. But the walls were covered in markings. Dates, names, financial figures, even the personal ID numbers of prison staff. It was an entire intelligence archive, meticulously carved into the concrete. This man hadn't been waiting to die. He'd been building a map of the entire system that held him captive. Then Ellison's flashlight landed on the final carving, etched deep and clean near the floor, separate from the rest. It read, "A day that never ends is easy to plan inside." Before she could even begin to process the chilling implications of that phrase, the main lights cut out completely, plunging the corridor into absolute darkness. Emergency power kicked in a few seconds later, casting everything in a hellish red glow, but the damage was already done. Across the entire facility, systems began to fail in a cascading, synchronized wave. Doors locked in the wrong positions, trapping guards and creating chaos. Camera feeds began to loop old footage, showing empty hallways where riots were breaking out. This wasn't random chaos. This was a symphony of destruction. It was perfectly choreographed. In that moment of red-lit horror, Ellison realized the horrifying truth. Inmate 78144-014 hadn't escaped physically. He never needed to. He had weaponized the prison's own routine, its own time, its own access protocols. He had turned the very machine designed to contain him into a weapon that served him. The dead men, Keller and the surveillance guard, they weren't just targets. They were warnings. They were the opening shots in a war no one even knew was being fought. By the time control was finally restored hours later, ADX Florence stood intact, but it was fundamentally changed. Officially, the public was told the incident was due to a series of internal system failures and, tragically, the stress-related deaths of 2 employees. There was no mention of a missing inmate, no acknowledgement of a complete system compromise. Ellison's final, detailed report was sealed indefinitely, buried under layers of classification so deep it might as well have been launched into the sun. Weeks later, as the world outside moved on, forgetting the minor news blip about a prison lockdown, a quiet update circulated through federal intelligence channels. A major international criminal operation, one that spanned 3 countries and was considered untouchable, had collapsed overnight. Bank accounts were drained to zero. Key leaders vanished without a trace. A wave of arrests was made, all based on anonymous, untraceable information that had appeared as if from nowhere. And at the bottom of the intelligence summary was a single phrase that made Ellison close the file, her hands trembling slightly. Source reliability, absolute. That night, alone in the silence of her apartment, Ellison's phone lit up with one last message. It was from an unknown, untraceable number. No image. No threats. Just 7 simple words. You came closer than anyone else. She deleted it immediately, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. Today, ADX Florence remains open. It is, by all official accounts, secure and fully operational. And if you look up the records, inmate 78144-014 is still listed as being housed there, his status noted simply as unchanged. But the guards who work the long nights tell a different story. They say that every quarter, right on schedule, the lights flicker for just a fraction of a second. And in that moment of near darkness, some of them swear they can hear a voice over the internal radio network, a voice that is calm, patient, and absolutely certain. Time, after all, is the easiest thing in the world to control when you live inside a day that never ends. And if you think this story was intense, you are not ready for what's coming next. Make sure you're subscribed, because the rabbit hole goes much, much deeper. Thanks for watching.